In yesterday's video, we finally met Ulysses. There were a number of ways to resolve our conflict with him, but if we chose to leave him alive, at the very end he tells us that if we ever get separated, he'll meet us by the canyon wreckage above Hopeville. Heading back through the canyon wreckage, we find Ulysses sitting on a rock overlooking the divide.
Full circle. Walked your road. Now back again. Something else in you needing an answer.
What are you doing here?
A question one could have asked you not long ago, before walking the road west into the storms. Need to be here, see what was done. It's custom of the bear to never see the marks it claws in the land. Not my custom. Maybe that's why you've come too. Need to see where the missile from Ashton touched ground down below in Hopeville. The Courier's Mile.
What's the Courier's Mile? Is that where the Ashton missile hit?
My name for it. If you have a better one, you grant it. My choice in names won't carry past you and I. Lies along the road, running from the Hopeville silo, straight onto where the ground burns and wind howls even stronger than here.
What about the marked men?
That's part of why I'm here. Watch them. If they attack me, try to enter the Mojave. I answer. Not looking to kill them. Save them, if I can. There might be something saving in them. If not, then what I do is mercy, not murder.
The divide's irradiated. Are you sure you want to stay here?
The invisible fires burn here, true enough. Still, to have helped carry out such an act, then not face it, not my way. If my life burns out here, so be it. Until then, I wait and watch, see what the road brings.
Is this where you're making camp?
Not a camp. Vigil, maybe. Never claimed it as mine. If anyone owns the divide, your claim is stronger than mine. Don't feel like adding a campfire to the ones that already burn below. If you brought Mojave gifts, might be able to shape something for the road.
Any recipes you can teach?
Depends what history has to say about them. There's a lot the land can provide, if you know the road that led to it. Mojave's got ways of healing most ills. If not, some tribes have usually found a way you didn't expect. Like healing powders. Tribes back west only use xander and rock flour. There's a way the twin mothers in the east used to brew it though. Called it bitter drink. Mixed up the xander and brock in a bottle. Added some kick to it, so your head doesn't get all clouded.
Interesting. What's the history of it?
History. Cures a wound, leaves the bitterness that caused it. The twin mothers were always about lessons. Caesar taught them the last one, though. So that's it for them. Recipe still exists. Legion uses it on forced marches with wounded soldiers. Wouldn't have made it through Crimson River Trail a few years back without it. Losing so much blood early on was a cazador feast. Enough xander root and brock flour along the trail, though. The Legion was able to keep pace and get where they were going.
Can you share the recipe with me?
Can do that, and one better. Just enough around to mix some. Here. Might make the twin mother's history live a little longer. You carrying it. When you drink it, down it all in one shot, or your stomach's not going to want to keep going after the second drink.
With that, he gives us 3 bitter drinks and shares with us the bitter drink recipe. Up until this point, we have only encountered bitter drink on the corpses of legionaries. It looks like the Legion consumes and adopts the technology and wisdom from the tribes they conquer, the recipe for bitter drink being one of them. To craft a bitter drink at a campfire costs 1 brock flour, 1 empty Sunset sarsaparilla bottle, and 1 xander root. It requires a survival skill of 15. Bitter drink just looks like a tiny clay vial. It heals 2 hit points per second for 18 seconds, but it's notable in that it does not harm the courier with radiation. Are there any more recipes you can teach?
Nothing more than I've already shared. We'll have to keep with what we know. Tired of history's lessons anyway.
I have some materials I've gathered, if you wanted to take a look.
Let's make something new from the old.
Ulysses here then functions as a campfire, and we can use him to craft many consumable items. Hey Ulysses, have you been to Hopeville since the Ashton missile hit?
Walk there sometimes. Keep the walks short. Still, it's important to see. Something else to answer for. Occasionally sift through the dust, the buildings. See if I can find some history, marks of America. If you want them, keep them. You've earned it. Nothing to be gained by me holding them, and more will surface in time.
With that, he gives us quite a store of goods. Rockets, MREs, an assortment of chems, and even one pre-war book, which has no real value in Fallout New Vegas, contrary to Fallout 3, aside from using the book chute back at the sink to turn them into blank books. But it makes a lot of sense, given the lore of this character. He can give us goodies like this every day, but if we choose to ask him for more before 24 hours pass by saying, "Find anything else in the dust of Hopeville?"
Nothing but wind, sand, ash. More may reveal itself in time. Not now. If you're determined, return. Might be something new surfaces.
I wanted to hear more about Hoover Dam.
Old world wall, run red with blood of bear and bull. It'll bleed more before the sun sets on the Mojave. That place and I have a past. Owe it a debt, and it owes me. If your path takes you there, know you're not the only one. It's the wall by which this age will be measured, the gravestone of the Mojave. Old world never meant it as such.
Well, I'm heading back to the Mojave to settle some things.
Can hear the weight in your feet. You're bound for that old world wall, Hoover Dam. Maybe not now. In time. Bear and bull shed too much blood there to let it go. Can't stop you from going. Wouldn't. A warning, though. The legate Linnaeus, whether Caesar stands or not, Linnaeus will come.
Who is Legate Linnaeus?
Linnaeus, the butcher, monster, terror of the East. Not even his slaves have seen his face. Struck them blind so they can't. Wears a mask. Don't even know if it's the same man. He put Colorado to the sword. Broke the hangdogs by throwing their hounds upon the flames, so they might burn forever in the afterlife.
Why is he coming west?
To take Hoover Dam, Legion will need something as big as the old world itself. Another symbol forged by history. Linnaeus carries all the terrors of the East with him. He's the myth, the weapon the Legion needs. When he arrives, he'll fall on Hoover Dam like a hammer. Break the bear in two.
Any idea on how to beat him?
19 tribes could not do it. All the lights in Vegas cannot. His strength lies in his title, and it is his weakness. He will not fight a losing battle and destroy what he represents. Put the idea of loss in him. Convince him the bear will not be the 20th tribe beneath his heel. It will make him pause like nothing on earth. You do not need to convince him alone. Draw upon history. The past of other legates are not filled with victories. Remind Linnaeus of this.
Other legates? Oh, you mean Joshua Graham.
Yes, Graham was broken on the wall of the dam. Caesar had him burned and cast into the earth, into the largest canyon you've ever seen. Watched the flames trail all the way to the bottom. Somehow, Joshua walked away from that, went beyond Caesar's gaze. His footsteps trailing fire, walking from one hell, maybe to another. When one is ruined like Graham was, sometimes home is the only place left. If so, he went to New Canaan, Caesar's anger written on him like a book. Caesar's orders to the Frumentari were to watch for him, find Graham, kill him. Didn't try. Could've. No good would have come of it. Graham earned his life and his nature. It'll kill him more surely than any blade of the Legion. So, if you've heard word of it or seen sign of him, let it keep. Let his history keep.
I'll remember that.
And there is nothing more to be done. The Mojave awaits.
This conversation sounded very NCR specific, but when I tried replaying it with High Vegas, Legion, or neutral reputations, I didn't find any new dialogue options. However, he has a lot to say about some of the other major events in the game, but since I want to avoid endgame spoilers, I won't include them in this video. With that, he gives us a lot of foreshadowing about our upcoming conflict at Hoover Dam. But we learned something important from him. The missile we launched from Ashton landed west of Hopeville and created a new, highly irradiated zone called the Courier's Mile. To explore it, we travel to the other side of the Hopeville missile silo. Heading down to the main road, we can turn west. Here we discover the path to the Courier's Mile. Remember in my second video in this series, when we went this way, it was completely blocked up with destroyed vehicles. But the blast from the Ashton missile has forged a path for us, and we can now pass into the Courier's Mile. Upon stepping in and traveling a short ways inside, we discover the Courier's Mile and complete the challenge named after it, requiring us simply to dare to venture into it. The Courier's Mile is a small, round zone bisected by a ruined road passing through the center. The southern half of this circle is swarming with Deathclaws, and the northern half of this circle is swarming with marked men. If we wait long enough upon entering the zone, the marked men and the Deathclaws will both wander towards the road, and when they see each other, they will attack each other. We could use that opportunity to pick them all off one by one, but since I'm not a melee build, and probably would have a hard time fighting them all at once, I'm gonna spend much of my time in the early portion of exploring this zone, killing these enemies from a distance. Near to a destroyed barber shop, we find a concrete slab that works great as a sniper's perch. Facing south-southeast, I'm gonna use my brush gun to try and take out as many of these Deathclaw as possible. But the biggest enemy right now is the radiation. When we first entered, we were only getting 1, 2, 3 rads per second, but standing here sniping Deathclaws, I'm getting 14 rads per second. If we head deeper towards the center of the zone, we can be exposed to 25 rads per second. This is an excellent opportunity to don the house version of the Courier's Duster and Ulysses mask. With those two pieces of clothing equipped, we get plus 80 to rad resist. But I didn't have any of those items of clothing at this point. This is the 8th video in my series. I'm showing it after having completed the ending, but when I played through the game, I came here first before confronting Ulysses. So I didn't have his mask, and I didn't bring any radiation gear from the Mojave. Remember, I started this DLC with no gear. So the only items I had to protect myself were Rad-X and Radaway. But as you'll see during this video, even though I've been collecting both of those since I started the game, I almost ran out. That's how quickly we absorb radiation in the Courier's Mile. After killing the Deathclaws, we can loot this ruined barber shop. On the second floor, we find a box with some jet and scrap inside. On the ground floor in the corner, we find 3 bottles of irradiated water and 1 Radaway. And then heading around back outside, next to the barber pole, we find an ammo box and a high-tech gun case. These gear-specific containers in the Courier's Mile have a random chance to spawn specific items, in this case, high-tech guns. After looting the final ammunition box, and my god, look at all of that ammunition, we can continue exploring. The Courier's Mile is indeed rich in gear, ammo, and chems, but it's one of the dangerous places in the game. Facing east down the road, we see a few more Deathclaw, walking dangerously close to the marked-men camps. These are irradiated Deathclaw. These unique Deathclaw are only found here in the Courier's Mile. They are distinct from other Deathclaw in that their melee attacks also deal radiation damage. But they're easier to kill for snipers like this character because they have 0 damage resistance or threshold, likely having been weakened or even blown away after being exposed to the Ashton nuclear blast. They also have reduced perception, likely another result of having survived the nuclear blast, making it more likely that we'll survive sniping these guys from afar. But if they ever get up close and personal, these could kill us with one hit. Because this Deathclaw wandered so close to the road, some of the marked men walked south to investigate. We can take the opportunity to get rid of some of them as well. These irradiated marked men are also unique to Lonesome Road, found only here in the Courier's Mile. Like all marked men, their health regenerates upon exposure to radiation. And since there is so much radiation here in the Courier's Mile, these guys were regenerating so quickly that I just couldn't whittle them down fast enough from a distance. My strategy here was to lure them towards me, because the closer they got to me and the further they got from ground zero, the slower radiation healed them. So for example, if towards the center of the zone the radiation was healing them 25 HP per second as they ran towards me, that dwindled to 14, 3 health per second, which allowed me to finally kill them. There are plenty more marked men to kill, but before we do, let's explore the southern half of this giant circle. Heading south, we can go behind the ruins of one of these buildings. Here we find an ammo crate and a personal footlocker next to some irradiated food and a desk. Going back around to climb inside these ruins, we find the next Ralphie poster. If you found all of the Ralphie posters up until this point, this will be the last one you find, completing the challenge. And inside a desk beneath it, we can walk away with a today's physician. We have to be careful if we choose to bring Eddie in with us, as he tends to run off into the middle of a group of Deathclaws and begin attacking them. The downside, of course, being once they render him unconscious, they race straight towards me. Retreating back to the ruined barber shop, we can try to take them out from a distance. There were a few more Eddie found. We can move back forward to take him out. When done, we can loot a box next to this blasted out building, and then facing west, we can explore the other side of the ruined building with the Ralphie poster. Here we find some random scrap and ammo crafting supplies. In the rubble to the south, we see one of the warheads. We can pull out our laser detonator to get rid of it. This reveals a small nook behind a ruined building, and inside we can loot an ammunition box and a lead-lined metal box. Inside this metal box, I found a breathing mask, and since I hadn't found Ulysses' mask yet, I went ahead and equipped it. Even now I could tell I would quickly run out of Rad-X and Radaway. All of the food we find here is irradiated. For example, I found a refrigerator here, and inside we find irradiated fruit, potatoes, and even Sunset sarsaparilla. The food grants us the same amount of hit points as usual, but additionally doses us in high levels of radiation. For example, consuming one of these irradiated Sunset sarsaparilla will douse us with 9 radiation. By now it was getting dark, but since I wanted to move quickly in the Courier's Mile so as to reduce my exposure to radiation, I didn't crouch quite so often. We can next head northeast to explore this ruined building by the road. We find a few containers in this wreckage and an unlocked wall safe, where we find a revolver, some ammunition, and chems. It was at this point that I thought it was just too dark even for me, so I took some cat eye, which improved visibility but had some unexpected side effects, which I'll show off a bit later. To access this truck, we can climb up some rubble on the northern side of this building, but this brings us dangerously close to the road, on the other side of which are the marked men. Eddie began playing his Ralphie Danger music, and here I crouched down to avoid being seen, but it was too late. The marked men were already walking my way. I used this concrete pile as a perch from which to snipe at these marked men, but we're nearly at the very center of this zone. Ground zero of the detonation. I could barely keep up with these guys. Even with Eddie supporting me, their health regenerated too quickly for me to make any progress. On top of that, they kept shooting flares at me, which set me on fire and reduced my visibility. That, in conjunction with the night sight effect of the elite riot gear and the cat eye I had consumed, made everything around me dazzling bright. Even the smoke and mist in the road glowed in the darkness, which provided excellent cover for the marked men. I quickly got to a point where I could only attack using VATS, because I simply could not see them. After spending way too much time trying to deal with this nonsense, I finally got fed up and pulled out Red Glare. I wasted way too many rockets, but you know what? I enjoyed myself. At last, I killed all of the doggone marked men, and I could finally climb up to explore this ruined truck. Next to the truck, we find 2 ammunition boxes. We can now head down to the road and loot the marked men corpses. Taking the road all the way to the west, we see that it ends at a big rubble wall surrounding the zone. Heading south to continue exploring the southern half of this sphere, we find another ruined building. Entering from the southeast, we can take the stairs down. Here we find 3 boxes on the bottom filled with ammo crafting supplies. And then taking the stairs all the way to the top, we find a lead-lined metal box, with thankfully more Rad-X and Radaway. On a wall nearby, we find a first aid box. And exploring the opposite side of this building, we loot a desk hanging out of a window, and then we see a skeleton leaning against a concrete wall surrounded by blast marks. And here we see his outline. This is supposed to be a nuclear shadow, which exists even in the real world. The bomb detonated so close to this person that it vaporized them, leaving a silhouette on the wall behind. However, their implementation here in the game is different from what we would find in real life. I explored nuclear shadows in depth in my Fallout 3 video on Sharon. But basically the way they work is a nuclear detonation will incinerate all nearby soft tissue, and the radiation from the detonation will bleach any nearby rigid structure. For example, a big concrete building. What the blast doesn't destroy, the radiation from the detonation will bleach. When a human body is standing between the light from the detonation and the concrete wall, the detonation will bleach the concrete surrounding the body. But the body will cast a shadow on the concrete and absorb much of the radiation while it disintegrates. So what we end up seeing with the nuclear shadow is not the outline of a person surrounded by a big blast like we see here in the Courier's Mile, but instead we see the shadow of the person, as he or she was when the light of the detonation reached the wall. The radiation then bleached the wall all around the person's shadow and then vaporized that person's soft tissue. It's the same effect we would have upon placing a stencil on a concrete driveway before cleaning it with a power washer. The concrete behind the stencil, or in this case the concrete behind the body, would be darker than the bleached or cleaned concrete beyond it. At any rate, I understand why they did it this way. It's much easier to create a nuclear shadow texture you can then place on concrete buildings than to craft a completely new retexture pack for all concrete, making the concrete lighter, but only where we find nuclear shadows. But the implications of what we see here are really rather devastating. We did this. This was us. When we launched that Ashton missile, we created this shadow. But perhaps we can console ourselves with the knowledge that this was likely a marked man anyway. On the ground floor beneath this level, we find quite a stash of gear. A military shipping crate with ammunition and a few weapon mods. These are randomized. In my case, I found a 357 revolver heavy-duty cylinder and a cowboy repeater custom action, which happened to be perfect for my character. She's spec'd into cowboy, which gives bonuses to revolvers and lever-action rifles. Near to this are two high-tech gun cases. In one, I found a tri-beam laser rifle and a riot shotgun, and in the other, explosives, including 5 mini-nukes and a grenade machine gun. Then we find 4 ammo boxes, each of which has hundreds of rounds of ammunition. Hitting this stash early in the game would set you up for probably the first 10 to 15 levels of gameplay alone. Holy cow. When done looting this cache, we can continue exploring behind the building. Here we see the remains of a Solitar gas station, and behind the building we can loot a dumpster. There is one more shipping crate in the rubble against the eastern wall, where we find some rockets, and that's it for the southern half of the Courier's Mile. Now we need to cross the road and explore the northern half. We see stumps sticking out of the ground, still smoking from the blast. Climbing some rubble to the west, we can loot a metal box, and we can use this rubble to climb up on top of part of the ruined overpass, but our reward for doing so is only looting a red toolbox. Heading back, we can drop down a hole on this floor to fall down to a small little corner of the bottom floor, the only way to access it. Here we can loot an emergency kit, where we find a flare gun, 1 satchel charge box, and an ammo box. Hopping out of this window, we can loot some of the bodies of the marked men we killed earlier, and then we can head north. Here we find a metal box near to another ruined building. Here we only find a few cabinets on the bottom floor, and no way to climb up to the top. So instead, moving northeast, we can explore the ruined corner of another big building. We can climb some rubble up to the first floor, where we find another huge ammo cache. We find 3 ammo boxes here filled with hundreds and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, 2 first aid / emergency kits filled with flares and an assortment of chems and health supplies, and a box with T-45D power armor inside of it. I read online that we don't always find power armor in this box. Instead, this box will generate a random full suit of high-end armor. I didn't try reloading a previous save to farm this box, but in theory I'm sure you could to get the kind of armor you wanted. I was fine with the T-45 power armor. If we use the rubble to climb up to the 3rd floor, all we find is a little radiated food, a metal box next to a red toolbox to the southwest with ammo crafting supplies inside, and then if we turn to the west, we can squeeze to the corner of a ruined room to loot 2 more ammunition boxes, some nails on the ground, and a first aid kit on the wall behind. Continuing west, we can turn north to find the remains of a marked man camp. More evidence that this place was inhabited by marked men even before we launched the Ashton missile. We see the next and final nuclear warhead here, but before detonating, we can turn west to loot the marked men camp. We find 2 ammo canisters on the ground next to a ruined wall, and moving to the northwest, we find another huge stash of goods. 3 more ammo boxes filled with hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and 2 lead-lined metal boxes, one filled with 10 auto-inject stim packs and auto-inject super stim packs, and the other filled with health items and a copy of Lad's Life and Today's Physician. After looting a few more containers in the rubble near to the camp, we can pull out our laser detonator and get rid of this warhead. If you explore the Courier's Mile in the order I present in this series, this is the final warhead. But since I came back to explore the Courier's Mile before confronting Ulysses, this was my 24th, because there are 6 more warheads found in Ulysses' temple. Destroying this warhead reveals a small room where we find a first aid kit, another lead-lined metal box, and 1 metal box. When done, we can finish exploring by heading west. If we walk over a big rubble ramp, we can climb down to explore the far end of this zone. Here we find a riot shotgun lying on the ground next to a barrel embedded in the dirt. And then exploring this ruined building, we find more irradiated food, both on a shelf and inside a nearby refrigerator. And climbing to the second floor, we can use it to leap upon a small ledge still attached to a concrete pillar. Here we can loot 2 ammo boxes and a damaged shipping crate. On our way out, heading back the way we came, we pass by a lamppost. But wait, what was that? Sticking in the side of this lamppost is a Bowie knife named Knapp. This is the best Bowie knife in the game and one of the best one-handed melee weapons in the game. It's a particularly great find for my character because the cowboy perk grants bonuses to knives like the Bowie knife. Knapp has a base damage of 30, 7 more than the Bowie knife, and more even than a fully upgraded war club from Honest Hearts. It's also faster, dealing 3.69 attacks per second compared to the Bowie knife's 3.46 attacks per second. This brings the DPS of the Knapp up to 110.8. compared to the Bowie knife's 79.6. Knapp has a special melee attack called the Knapp attack, which does only 80% of its normal damage in VATS, but it costs 7 fewer action points, greatly increasing the amount of damage you can do per action point. It also grants the player plus 10 to sneak and has a greater weapon reach. It looks like a typical Bowie knife, and it is considered an improved holdout weapon, meaning you can sneak it into casinos. For a courier who has all related perks, this weapon can do a whopping 290.7 DPS. That's more damage than even Old Glory, the flagpole we got from Ulysses. But of course, even though that one's slower, it does pack a bigger punch. And with that, we fully explore the Courier's Mile. It's a hugely rewarding zone to explore, but extremely dangerous. It's good to explore it after defeating Ulysses, so that we have plenty of radiation protection when we arrive. I still feel bad having launched a nuke 200 years after humanity should have already learned its lesson, but at least we didn't kill any innocents. With the Courier's Mile behind us, we still have a bit to explore. If we chose to launch nukes at the very end of the game, as we explored in yesterday's episode, then we will have created 2 more highly irradiated zones like this one, the Long 15 in NCR territory and the Dry Wells in Legion territory, each of which is arguably filled with even more riches than what we find here in the Courier's Mile. We'll continue our exploration in tomorrow's video. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week on a wide range of topics spanning all of the games, but this week, like last week, I'm dedicating to the Lonesome Road DLC of Fallout New Vegas. If you want to make sure you don't miss my next episode in this series, be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. I created a song that I played in yesterday's video. After hearing your feedback, I'm working on publishing it so that you can download it to your device. It'll be available for download shortly, and once available, I'll include a link to it in the description below. I've got a brand new shirt in the shop. Who are you that do not know your history? On the front, we have the famous quote, and on the back, we have the stars and stripes of the old world. I've got a version of this shirt with just the stars and stripes and no quote, and another version with just the quote and no stars and stripes. All 3 versions come in a myriad of colors and in a variety of sizes, and I have a bunch of other designs on a bunch of other products. You can find a link to my shop in the description below, or you can click here. If you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early, with episode 9.